Hello, friends and beautiful people. It is Catherine. It is Monday Masterclass here in We Are New Earth Facebook group. Let's see who's going to jump on live. I am Catherine Massell, 5D visionary and elevated consciousness coach. CatherineMassell.com, teacher of the one-of-a-kind and amazing group program, In Alignment and Thriving core program, and also for soul-led entrepreneurs, which I'm teaching right now, and you can still jump in there if you're trying to revamp your business for 2022. This is your program. Good morning, Danielle. Jante, good afternoon, wherever you might be in the world. I'm drinking something that is not pumpkin spice. So today, I want to talk about something that is a common denominator in all of our lives, really. And that is the fact that we have coping mechanisms, right, for survival. Pardon me. Good morning, Ashley. Hello. A good afternoon where you are. We are all sharing this thread of belief, a way of being in our existence, that it ties us all together in the sense that the human species is built for survival. That's what we're built for. We are meant to go on, we are meant to thrive, we are meant to proliferate. We can do a little bit better job with that, right? As we are moving towards unity consciousness, this is something it behooves us to get more adept at, right? Leading this planet forward into a higher timeline. But something that is, unique to us in the way we experience it, every single person on this planet. But we all have these coping mechanisms, and they were all put in place at a time in our lives when we were very young. Okay. Hi, Carol. And when this inception of this way of being came about, it was at a time that we were very young in terms of developmental capabilities mentally. We weren't really ready for it. We didn't have all the tools in place to be able to handle something that felt like that it was painful or scary, and it caused fear and made us feel unsafe. And this could have been any number of things that when we, or if we were to go and look back on it now from our vantage point, our current vantage point, where we feel like we've had enough scary things happen in the world, we're not immune to them, right? We've had enough scary, off-putting things in our life where we just feel like whatever that might have been early on, we kind of buried it with a lot of other stuff and a lot of conditioning that actually came from that. So we became very accustomed to this way of feeling. But at the time that it happened, when we were tiny humans, not very developmentally equipped with realizing we had different choices with how to deal with something that was scary or made us feel unsafe, or the world felt unsafe at large, we didn't really have the best capabilities to handle it. So when we are tiny humans, we tend to see the world as something that's safe. Hopefully, a lot of us go through a period of time where we can remember, we have a sensation, we have an experience of feeling the world is safe, feeling like we're safe in it. We're born, we're loved, we're passed around to the grandparents, we may have come into hopefully a loving home or something that was loving enough for us at the time. And there was a moment where a shift took place. I call it a core event. I call it an original cause that made us have an internal decision that we are not safe, that the world is not safe. And in order to get past this situation, in order to literally survive past this moment, past this core event, this original cause, we needed to develop something, put something in place so that we could feel safe, so that we could feel capable of going on past this point. And this is the moment where we develop the ego. This is the moment of the ego's inception. So what's really going on a spiritual level is that divine soul-led aspect of who we are that may at that point, up until that point, only know love, only know kindness and care, has a split. We fragment. And we really, it's like a birthing full on into our humanity. It's into the human ego's inception, really. And the problem is that we go through life without being able to see ourselves or see the world or the reality of things as they truly are. It's hard for us to see beyond this veil that we put in place, okay? Now, the core event, the original cause that allowed for that split to take hold, was not our fault. In fact, it's not anybody's fault, okay? There's always wounding and trauma that leads to this event in the first place happening, okay? That had to do with the people who, or the events in which brought this split about. It's nobody's fault, okay? So when we develop this veil, that literally it creates like this sphere of reality that is a false projection based on this fear and this core belief that we're not safe and the world isn't safe. And we end up feeling like we're not capable of being able to navigate through life without these certain coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms, they're a form of defense. They're a form of trying to keep us safe. But they're never meant to be a guideline from which we live the rest of our lives by. They're never meant to be this kind of inner barrier, because that's what they end up being, to keep us literally from all the things we desire to be, do, and have. It acts like this kind of internal firewall where, in order to keep us safe, this coping mechanism is there to keep us safe, to keep us surviving, because that's what's built into our humanity as a species. We're here to survive, we're here to proliferate. So this inner firewall almost acts like a penetration barrier that keeps us literally from the things that we're asking to be, do, or have that we know are more fulfilling and satisfying for us. We know that they're aligned with growth. We know that they're aligned with us having more and expansive overflow of all the things we want and all the juicy things in life that feel abundant and prosperous. So we want these things. It's natural for us to want these things from our divine vantage point, from our spiritual standing of being a divine, infinite being that is eternal. It is our natural state to want growth and to experience growth, by the way. The problem is this internal firewall that is built up when we're really young is programmed essentially to keep all of that out, because it just feels like something that's yet again unfamiliar and thereby unsafe. And so these coping mechanisms allow us to kind of go into these archetypal expressions of self. And they're called inner saboteurs, okay? Now, your inner saboteurs that got put in place so that you could survive when you fragmented from your divine soul-led self and went into that full birth canal of being a human, you had your ego's inception, which is the small self. That's the self and the version of you that is looking through your life right now. If you haven't solved the problem of your inner saboteurs, you haven't learned how to work with them, what you're doing is seeing reality through a very contracted sphere of reference. It's almost like looking at your life through this little keyhole. So you're not seeing anything outside of this little keyhole. That's what your inner saboteurs do for you, okay? They contract your experience. They pull you back from the wholesomeness and the fullness of the experience of life. Does this make sense? So these inner saboteurs become personality traits. They become characteristics for you. And instead of being something that's put in place for a short time to help you to survive and get through and get on the other side of something painful, it ends up being an entire lens of perception by which we navigate through our entire life. Well, hopefully not entire, but maybe up until this point right now, right? Does this make sense? Are you guys following me? So, given that, there is so much about you, about the world, that you are just not open to seeing. Because this way of being, these ways of being, these inner saboteurs, and usually, there's about 3 or 4 of these inner saboteurs that are running the show of our life at any given time. They've been given the keys to the kingdom, in other words, to be the point of perception, the point of perspective from which we navigate our lives. But it's not an accurate depiction of what's really going on. It's not an accurate depiction of who we really are. It's not an accurate depiction of what we're actually capable of as a whole. All the possibilities and potentials available to us literally cannot be seen from this vantage point. Can this be more than one event? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it could also be, if there are different events, it could be a re-traumatizing and kind of an amplified experience of the original core event and the feelings that came around from that. Does that make sense? But I happen to believe that it's more than one event, but there is one event that started it off, that started that cascade, that learned us into fear, because from a divine, infinite standpoint of who we are, there isn't fear. Fear is a human construct. It is an emotional experience that is very unique and special to 3D and 4D experience. It doesn't exist as a vibration, as a frequency beyond 4D, beyond fourth dimensional reality. It is literally an energy that can't be supported in higher dimensional realms. Does that make sense? So fear is a completely learned human construct. And so that point of that break, that split, that fragmenting within us, there's always a core event for that, but it can happen again, that kind of split. And we could fragment even further, and we often do. And think about it this way. We continue to fragment ourselves from the wholeness and the divinity and the eternal nature and the abundant nature thereby of who we are, because of the thoughts that we think and the feelings that we feel that are in alignment with this belief system that came about from this core event. Does that make sense? I know there's a lot of information in that last statement. So think of it this way. In other words, you'll keep fragmenting from that eternal nature of you that only knows abundance, that only knows growth, that only knows expansion, that only knows prosperity, that only knows love. You will keep fragmenting with each belief that you keep believing, each thought you keep having, that tells you you're smaller than you actually are. So multiply that times every day in your life that exists on a continuum past this core event split. All the times in the day of all those days in your life that you've thought those limiting and small and contracted thoughts that come from a very limited scope of how you're seeing yourself and seeing the world. So how many times or how much do you think you've actually fragmented from who you are in your natural, eternal, soul-led nature that only knows love and abundance? A lot is the quick and dirty answer, yeah? Is this sinking in, guys? That's good coffee. So when you think of these coping, a lot, Michelle says. Hi, Michelle. So when you think of these coping mechanisms and you were to give them a personality, in other words, like an archetypal representation, when we're in the In Alignment and Thriving core program, what we do is we look at 9 of these archetypal representations, these inner saboteurs. Okay. And I'll try to remember all 9 of them, but I don't know if I can. But maybe some of you who are in the program can help me here. We have the hypervigilant, we have the hyperachiever, we have the pleaser, we have the stickler, we have the controller, we have, you know what? I have my list here. Let me get it. What else do we have? I mentioned the pleaser, the stickler, the hypervigilant, the restless, the hyper-rational, and the victim. You can't forget about the victim. The avoider. Thank you, Danielle. We said it at the same time. The avoider, because they represent strongly in our energy, don't they? We've talked about this. So, not to call you out, Danielle. Sorry about that if that was too candid. But hey, I'm willing to fess up if you are. And we all have, and these are just a small sampling of the kind of inner saboteurs that we can label or have an archetypal representation of. There are many, many more. But we focus on these 9 because they really tend to hit home with a lot of people. And when we start dismantling what the characteristics are of these inner saboteurs, and we look at how that particular archetypal representation showed up for us early on in our lives, when we had that fragmenting, we had that split, we start to have a lot of aha moments. We start to have a lot of revelations. And part of this dismantling process that is just, it's so powerful, it's so revelatory, and it is so life-changing and energy-shifting. It's looking at the core event of how this got there. And we look at it really like your top, 1 to 3 saboteurs. Sometimes when you take the saboteur assessment, which is something you can take, by the way, and I'll give you the link for it. It's totally free to take the saboteur assessment and see what your inner saboteurs are. And you get to see exactly where these are halting progress and growth in your life or stopping you from it directly. I'll put that link in here. But when we start to really dismantle the core event, this is the deep process that I take you through in the In Alignment and Thriving core program, you start to see that core event, what happened there. And it may not even, when you go back and look at it now, again, from your vantage point of being like, hey, I've had lots of weird shit and uncomfortable stuff happen in my life, like, this is old hat. But the problem is, at the time when this original core event, this original cause moment took place, it was a very big deal for you. It was when you made a decision. You made the decision. Yes, there were players involved in enacting this scenario, this core event to take place, but it's no one's fault. It's not the event's fault. It's not the person's fault. We're here to play a game of contrast and duality. Whoever helped introduce this original core event for you is partners in a drama that we know is 3D existence, okay? They are agents of the universe helping us to act out what we came here to experience, really. But it was a very big deal to us at the time, so we made the decision to break from our eternal nature, to fragment off from our divinity, and start thinking of ourselves in a very small, very contracted, very limited way. We made that decision. It's important to accept and acknowledge that we did that. That's the only way we can clean it up and move on, okay? So I take you through a very deep process of looking at this and healing this. It's very powerful. Let me just say that. You don't come out of this program the same person because you really don't see yourself the same way after you're done with this process. You can't. You cannot see yourself the same way. So you come out of this program literally a different person. The person you're meant to be. The person you were before the world got its hands on you and you had that split. So it's important to accept and acknowledge that we made that decision to fragment from our Godself, in other words, from our soul-led aspect. So if we made that decision then we can make a powerful decision now to clean up that disconnect, to untether ourselves from all that fragmenting and all the beliefs, all of the ideas, all of the thoughts and the feelings that we have about ourselves that continue us on this path of fragmenting from our God self. We don't have to do that anymore. We can literally make a decision, and this is always from our master God self aspect, to roll all that back, to reverse engineer all of those thoughts, all of those beliefs, all of those ideas that we created about who we are that are actually not true at all. They are completely and utterly false. But it doesn't mean that we don't act on them as if they're true. But unless you see how these inner saboteurs actually work in your life to create this representation of you in your life that's a false projection, until you really see that and make that connection, you can't clear it up and you can't move past that. It's always going to feel like a false start when you start on a new process of personal growth or expansion, or you try to introduce something new in your life. These inner saboteurs, simply as mechanisms of coping from a survival level state, they swoop in because that's what they're used to. That's your programming. That's what you've given the keys of the kingdom to these inner saboteurs. But here's the thing about your inner saboteurs. And that's why this is a love story, okay? And that's why you can only heal this with love, okay? That's why when people say they like to kill the ego or smash it down, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. We're not here to kill the ego. We're here to recognize its role in giving us our humanness and creating human identities, but we're here to learn or remember how to go back into a frequency where we live at a level that has risen above that, okay? That's what we're here to do. So, I lost my page. There I am. Is this making sense? I hope. So, what was I going to say before I lost my page? So, when you look at these inner saboteurs and how they got there, this is why it's a love story. And this is why you're only going to heal this with love. Because when you were a tiny human and you were struggling to understand what was happening in this time where you fragmented, you had the ego's inception out of a place of fear, something stoked or invoked fear within you, okay? It was this kind of, it's our fall from grace, literally. It's our fall from grace is the first moment we experience fear. Think about that. I mean, and how would you parallel that with, the Bible story of our fall from grace, Literally, our Garden of Eden is coming into the world, and we're still very close to the world that we came from at that point. We're still in that kind of spiritual limbo, that place of grace, where we still remember our eternal aspect. We're still navigating to a certain degree through that eternal aspect, through our Godself. And then that first moment that we experience real fear. We fear for our body, we fear for our survival, we fear for, our mental state even, but we don't have words to be able to articulate that. We don't have language to be able to grasp that. We don't even have someone in place, really, who can help us understand this trauma, because usually those people are the ones that are in trauma as well. We don't have the ability to make a better decision in that moment where we first experience that fall from grace, our first experience of fear. We don't have a way to talk about or relate to something higher than that. We are only experiencing fear. And in that frame of reference, we make a decision about ourselves that we don't want to feel that way anymore. We want to do whatever we can so that we don't feel that way. And so these inner saboteurs come into play as a way of helping us cope, as a way of defending us against a world that feels unsafe. But the problem is with that, and with kind of creating this external shield or shell around you in the form of this inner saboteur, or this, what's the other word I'm looking for? This ego personality, because that's essentially what it is. Instead of understanding or knowing that we have a higher and better choice at that time. We go with whatever feels like a strong presence. And the inner saboteur, in one way or another, it doesn't matter how that inner saboteur shows up, we make the decision that this thing is stronger than me. This inner saboteur has more strength and power than me. And so, of course, we're going to give our energy over to this personality to help it run our lives. Does that make sense? I'm trying to break this down as simply as I can. And so the inner saboteur then, when you frame it in that perspective, is not there to hurt you. It's not there to see you fail. It doesn't want to diminish your experience of life. It doesn't want to do any of those things. It doesn't have that built into its programming, and that's what it is. It's programming. It comes from the ego. It's an entirely human construct. It's there to protect you. And so we form this bond with this inner saboteur, and it's like we make this inner decision to say, okay, you take the reins, because I can't do it. But what that leaves us with is we abandon this eternal aspect of self that does feel capable, where we do believe in ourselves, where we do trust ourselves. We decide to let all that go and sacrifice that for the sake of this kind of protector energy. But the inner saboteur itself came to you as a rescue from a place of deep love. It's like the universe picked this inner saboteur as an agent or a representative to represent you in this life so that you could be safe. But it was never meant to be a personality by which we navigate our entire lives by. Does that make sense? So it really is a love story. It's there out of love so that we could get through something that was very painful, and we could get over on the other side of something that felt like we couldn't do it on our own. So when we look at this inner saboteur from a place of deep love, what we're really looking at is an aspect of ourselves that's unloved. And unloved by who? Unloved by you. And so we fragment ourselves through this inner saboteur. It's like we send parts of ourselves away. So we're never going to feel full and clean and purified and wholesome if we keep doing that. So they're unloved parts of self. That's what your inner saboteurs really are. And in the moment you made the decision not to trust yourself, not to feel capable in light of a painful situation. And it's not your fault either, because you were only making decisions with the information you had at that moment, which as a tiny human was not very much to work with. And developmentally, you weren't in a place where you could reason things out, right? See a higher choice, know that one even existed. Does that make sense? So in this moment, can you give yourself some grace and forgiveness for not knowing any better at the time, because that's what it really is? Can you give yourself some love and belief in this moment that there is so much more to you? It's just been veiled because you've been handing over the keys to your kingdom to these inner saboteurs. Can you be with that and sit with that and give it the grace that it needs to be an expansive energy within you that feels like a welling up of love that never got to fully express itself? Just let it happen. And it might be, that form of release makes you want to burp or cry or fart. All of those things are okay. That's a release. Let it happen. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about that? So just this realization and being in the moment with what I'm talking about here is already starting to shift this for you. So, take some comfort in that you showed up here for a reason today to hear this, because your soul was asking for this information, not because it doesn't know it, but your human doesn't know it. Or your human does on a subconscious level know it, but it needs to consciously know it, right? It is painful, absolutely. Anywhere we have abandoned ourselves is painful. And even though the inner saboteurs had to come about from a place of self-abandonment, literally, we were pushing a part of ourselves out. It was too painful, so we sent this part of ourselves away, right? That's really, that has more to do with when we try to make improvements in our life and it feels like we're always in feast and famine, we're always like 4 steps ahead, 20 steps back. It really comes from this place that we're not wholesome. We are not coming from a place of wholeness. There are so many unloved parts of self that we've sent away that it's like the fullness of you wants to receive all of these changes, but it can't. Because there's literally other parts of self that you have sent away that are not on board with your agenda of making solid improvements in your life that stick. Does that make sense? So that's why cleaning up your inner saboteurs and developing a relationship with them, and yes, you can develop a wholesome relationship with them, but it is about bringing back these unloved parts of self, literally calling them home, and you can only do that from a place of love. So that's why I kind of bristle at people who talk about killing the ego and smashing it down. What you resist persists, plain and simple. So if you are resisting your ego, which is a human construct, it's almost like denying your human. Your human has an expression in this lifetime, in this 3D reality, just as much as your eternal divine self does. The problem is we've let the scales be tipped towards mostly ego and a little bit of spiritual side when we're sitting on our meditation mat. No, we are in a realm of duality here. So we are many natures at once. We are spiritual and divine and human all at once. To deny one aspect or give one purview over the other is not balanced. It's not wholesome. It's always going to feel unclean. It's always going to be begging for purification. Does that make sense? So what your human is asking for is purification. What your human is asking for is wholesomeness. And only you can call those unloved parts of self home and look at them in a light of love. Accept that they're there, accept how they got there, acknowledge how they got there. And only in that place of grace and self-forgiveness and self-belief and self-love can you fully release the burdensome negative shadow side aspects of these inner saboteurs. It's a powerful process, you guys. I found when I talk to my ego, when I realize that's who's talking, I can change my emotional response to a situation. Absolutely. It's about having a different relationship with your ego, not about killing it. And that's impossible, by the way. It's just going to find new and interesting ways to come up. It's like the reference I always use, that carnival game Whack-A-Mole, where you have the big mallet and the little mole keeps popping up out of the little plastic casing. And you have to keep smashing it down, and you smash it down, another one just comes up in another place. That's what the ego does. You know, it's not going to leave you alone. But it can be reasoned with. You can bring it on board with what you're doing in a place where it won't try to sabotage or thwart your best efforts to improve your life. But you can't do that from a place of, I hate you, you're ruining my life. It has to be from a place of love. Everything gets solved with love. Everything. Okay? And this is a mystery. This is a problem you solve with love. Clearing up the relationship with your inner saboteurs and actually seeing that they do have a positive aspect to the shadow side. And we've been expressing our inner saboteurs through the shadow side, but when we roll that energetic potential over, that's just been misplaced energy with which we've been using these saboteurs to help us guide our life. It's just misplaced energy. Thereby, it's just energetic potential. And it exists to fund whatever we want to fund. So if you stop that kind of cascade of like going back into the habituated process of handing over your life to your inner saboteurs over and over again, when you have the knowledge and the awareness and the acceptance to see yourself in the moment when you're doing it, you just say, okay, I'm going to roll this over. It's just energy. I'm going to roll it over to my positive master aspect. I call it the master accelerator. Because when we're in this moment of realizing how we are self-limiting by going back yet again, to our vantage point of our inner saboteur and trying to answer the questions of life through this aspect of us, it's always going to feel unfulfilling. It's always going to be unsatisfying. It's not going to feel whole. It's not going to feel complete. And it makes us feel off. And that's how you know that you're going to your inner saboteur, because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel aligned. Okay? So it's just energy. When you catch yourself in that moment, you get really good at it after a while. Trust me, you do, but it takes practice. And you just say, but if I'm in my master accelerator aspect, I realize that I have the same energy available to make a decision, but I don't have to make a self-diminishing, self-discounting decision like I would if I was in my inner saboteur shadow side energy. Instead, I can roll that energetic potential over to something that is higher and better for me. And whenever you are making that choice, you are making a choice to serve the planet. You're basically making a choice to serve unity consciousness. When you're choosing love over fear, you are choosing unity. Why? Because you're choosing unity within. You're choosing harmony. You're choosing to make a decision that feels good, that feels enriching, that feels nourishing. It feels like it's going to take you somewhere that's aligned with the desires that you have, right? So the more and more people, in other words, who make a decision in their life based on this awareness, this, being in the now and being present with the decisions that they're making, the thoughts they're having, the beliefs that they're still believing in. If we had the awareness and the acceptance to be like, you know what? I'm going to make this decision, but it doesn't feel good. So how can I make a different decision? What if we all took a beat and said, well, what if I chose from my master aspect? I would be choosing something higher and better. The more people on the planet do that, you serve unity within. And that is always a projection to unity without. We cannot have unity consciousness on a collective scale unless we all experience unity within. Do you see how that works? It is never outside in, this work, folks. It's always inside out. So if you're walking around proclaiming, to live by the principles and the ethos of unity consciousness, I must ask you, how much are you experiencing unity and harmony within? Because what is going to be projected and reflected in your external reality is an exact mirror of what's going on within you. Every time. Every damn time. And as someone who speaks about, would like to scream from the rooftops, all the tenets and the principles and the ethics of unity consciousness, I can talk about that on a grandiose scale, and I can talk about all the virtues of that and how powerfully that's aligned with 5D, but it doesn't mean shit unless I give you some sort of practical and tangible application that hits home for you in your life and how it's affecting your life right now. That is why I teach In Alignment and Thriving Core Program. Because it is about unity within. It is an inside job, unity consciousness, always and ever. And if we hope to see this projected onto the material, physical plane of 3D that allows us to rise past the hubs of consciousness of 3D, there's only one way to do it, folks. Within. Each one of us has to have unity and harmony within first. Does that make sense? Are you guys following me? Give me some hearts. Give me some love if you're getting all the feels. Good. I'm glad. Does anyone have any questions about what I've shared here? Do you see how this is a love story? And it's ultimately, and it really is, about self-love. How can you ever expect to have any experience of real, true, lasting, wholesome, truly nourishing love outside of you if you don't first have it right here? The answer is you can't. It will always feel fleeting. It will always feel like there's something missing, because there is. Because you haven't fully called back all those unloved parts of self. And that's really just what your inner saboteurs are. And they came to you at a time out of love. That is an act of love that they came in. They swooped in to rescue you from a painful situation so that you could keep going, so that you could get on the other side of something that was really painful and traumatic at the time. If that's not love, I don't know what that is. So it's our responsibility to reframe this kind of, yes, ultimately feels like self-discounting, a less than wholesome experience of life. It's love that allowed that shift in the first place. It really is. Because the inner saboteurs came in out of a place of love so that you could survive. But it's not about surviving anymore. I mean, it is, of course, as a baseline, as a foundation. But this was the foundation of our lives, the baseline, of course, is survival. How can we have any experience of life without being able to survive life every day? So that's just a baseline. That's just a foundation. Having enough to eat, having some shelter, having water, right? That's just a baseline foundation of being. Everything else is part of a natural process of growth and expansion into more and elevating levels, evolving levels of abundance and prosperity. That is our birthright. That is our legacy. But if you're living from behind this veil of your inner saboteurs, where you've literally given them the keys to your kingdom, you won't experience that level of your master. You're not, frequency-wise, you're not available for it. Because you are only seeing your life through this little keyhole. You're seeing a really small and false projection of you that isn't real. Who you are is well beyond that keyhole. Who you are is much, much bigger than that. You are naturally built for, everyone on this planet is naturally built for expansion. Think about your physical body. You're born as this tiny human with a skeletal system, yet somehow the bones are malleable. The tissue, the fascia, the organs of your body, they're built for growth. They're built for expansion. They're built to experience movement. Everything about your body is built for movement, for growth, for expansion. Why would you think the nature of you, in terms of how you think of yourself, how you be, why would you think that that's just limited to one state and it stays the same? Nothing about you is built that way, especially when you look at your physical body. Everything about you is built for fluidity and growth and expansion. The things you want in your life, your desires, are no different. Does that make sense? So you can either, in light of what you know now after this talk, go back to your life after this call and treat it the exact same. Look at it the exact same way. That's entirely up to you. You have free will choice. No judgment. My job is just to give you this information and say, here's what you do with it. You can go back and look at your life in the same way. That's entirely up to you. But will you? Can you? Or is there some self-delusion there? Because now that you know this and now that you see this, you can't not know it. You can't not see it. It's always going to be there in the back of your mind, like, but I'm really so much more than this. I'm making the decision that feels small, and it feels like a decision I would have made before, not knowing all these things I know about myself now. Can you really make those same decisions? Can you really look at your life the same way, knowing what you know now? It's going to be hard. And there's going to be some self-denial rolled up in that. So I am offering you the how. I am offering you the how. This is how you clear this up. This is how you reclaim those unloved parts of self and love them properly as they always should have been. This is what allows you to feel wholesomeness. This is what allows you to see your life from a much bigger sphere of reference, have a different perspective on your life. That is a truer aspect of reality than the false projection through which you've been seeing it before. This is what In Alignment and Thriving Core Program is all about. And so what's great about this is that when you join this program, not only is there a ton of bonuses, and I'll put this in the comments, but there's a lot of bonuses available with this program, but you also have access to all the replays from the last live round that we just completed. So if you're fired up to start this work, you can start it right now, today. And then on 11/11, which is going to be another really powerful cosmic portal, 10/10, we're still in kind of the throes of the 10/10 portal, but 11/11 is when we are starting the next live round of In Alignment and Thriving. And once you join, you're a lifer. So you join with lifetime access. That means you come and join us every time I teach it live for free. So you've paid once, it's a lifetime investment, and you get to join us every single time, even when the price goes up. You get in at that price that you joined at, and you don't ever have to pay more, even when the price of the program goes up, and it will. It will. But right now, it's staying at this price at least until the end of 2021. So does anyone have any questions for me at all about what was covered here, or how this pertains to you particularly? Go ahead and ask, and then I'm going to jump off in about 5 minutes. Because I am teaching the In Alignment and Thriving for Soul-Led Entrepreneurs program right after this. So no questions? Okay, guys. So I invite you to think about this. I invite you to actually take this saboteur assessment. So let me give you, let me see if I can find it. See you there, Danielle. I'm going to give you the, hold on, I'll move this around here. The saboteur assessment that's free. So for those of you who have not done this saboteur assessment, you're welcome, Donna. This is something that is on my sign-up page, the sales page for In Alignment and Thriving Core Program. This is a totally free assessment, so you take it, it's totally online, and then you are sent through email the results of this assessment. So you get to see from this the exact ways that you are sabotaging your reality. Let's see. It's so powerful just taking this saboteur assessment alone. Because it gives you a lot of insight and even a little bit of backstory on exactly how this has been contributing to you pulling back from life, making yourself smaller in life because of these inner saboteurs. What we do in the In Alignment and Thriving Core program is go through a very, very in-depth process of basically reverse engineering how these saboteurs have been running your life and going to the core event, the original trauma split that allowed this ego inception to take hold in the first place. So it's a very, very powerful process. And you don't leave this program the same person. You just don't. You just don't. So this is a great way to get yourself ready for 2022. Is going to be another big year, guys. It's going to be another big year of shifts. What level of preparedness would you like to have for that? To be able to make higher and better choices for yourself from a place of your master perspective instead of through the lens of your inner saboteur, through the lens of limitation. So this is that program. So I will give you the full Monty here of the description of this program in the comments as well. But I want to thank you guys for joining today. Enjoy the energies of this 10/10 portal. We're going to be riding them out at least through Friday. enjoy big revelations, big aha moments and shifts in your life that are just really, again, the kind of energy that's like, once you know it, you can't not know it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So what will you do with that? Don't sweep it under the rug. This is the highest aspect of you and the universe saying to you, it's time to look at this stuff. It's time to look at where you're holding yourself back. It's time to see where you are in self-denial and self-limiting. It's your birthright to move beyond that. It's your birthright to be more. And any kind of fear you have around that is misplaced, because in a natural evolution of you becoming more, moving into thriving and overflow, that's your birthright. That's who you are. That's your eternal nature. There's nothing to fear there. If you trust and feel capable within, and you have self-belief, which, by the way, comes from having a better relationship with your inner saboteurs, then growth is natural. It's the most natural thing in the world. Overflow and more is the most natural thing in the world. And you'll truly see it that way, because you won't have the veils and filters in place that you did before. So lots of love and peace to you all. Bye-bye.